Moving now to the Israel-Hamas war, where Israeli airstrikes have hit about 200 Hamas targets in Gaza. This is according to the Israeli Defense Forces, who gave an update today, a day after the IDF announced it was expanding its ground operations to the entire enclave. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Red Crescent Society today also revealed that 5 people have been injured during an Israeli military raid at the Galandia refugee camp north of Jerusalem. The organization said one of the injuries was caused by live ammunition. We have details in this report.
The Israel Defense Forces says it carried out strikes against some 200 Hamas targets in Gaza overnight. This comes as ground forces continue to operate in the Strip. Ground forces also directed airstrikes overnight, including against cars they claim were ferrying missiles and mortars for Hamas operatives. The Israeli Navy added that it also carried out strikes targeting suspected Hamas observation posts and other infrastructure along Gaza's coast. This is after the Israel Defense Forces revealed that 3 more Israeli soldiers have been killed fighting against Hamas in Gaza, bringing the number of IDF losses inside the Palestinian enclave to 69 since the military operation began in October. Meanwhile, the funeral of Colonel Hamami, who served as the commander of Gaza's Southern Brigade on October 7th, has taken place in Gaza. The funeral was held this morning in Tel Aviv, with thousands in attendance, including former Chief of Staff and Israeli Defense Minister. In another development, protesters on the sidelines of the 2023 UN Climate Change Conference in Dubai gathered to beat their drums for peace in Gaza, raising a large banner calling for an end to the war. This, according to the protesters, is to show solidarity with the people in the besieged Gaza Strip and the first UAE pro-Palestine demonstration. As the Israel-Hamas war continues, Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh Al Thani has emphasized the need for a ceasefire in Gaza in a call with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The Prime Minister reaffirmed Qatar's commitment alongside its mediation partners to ongoing efforts aimed at restoring calm to the region. He further expressed concern that the continuation of bombings in the Gaza Strip after the humanitarian pause complicates mediation endeavors and worsens the humanitarian crisis.
Well, joining me now to speak on the Israel-Hamas war is a global affairs analyst, Amuda Mosigbodi. Joins me via Zoom. Good to have you join us on the news at this time. This is a new phase in the war after a cessation of hostilities a few days ago. Where do we go from here?
Well, the only place and the only way to go from here is still going to be the direction of conflict resolution. We cannot dispute the fact that the casualties and fatalities on either side, either Hamas or the Israeli forces, has not been something expected. Don't also forget the fact that vulnerable persons have been most affected in this war. Children and, of course, women. We've also seen attack on what we will call sacred facilities during war, because there are basic war ethics, and these war ethics have not been followed. We've seen attack on, humanitarian facilities like hospitals, and of course, even we've seen health personnel being held captive in this situation. So the only way to go is to still come back to the negotiation table. As we often say, in conflict resolution, that every war will still end at the negotiation table. So there is still a need to go back to the negotiation table to discuss things out. Yes, there's been a truce which has not been followed by either party. There's a need to go back to that negotiation table, and confidence building is very key at this point.
All right, talking about going back to the negotiation table, we know that the Pope has also called for a new ceasefire amidst Israel's raids. Is there any optimism about religious intervention at this time?
Talking about religious intervention, don't forget that Israel is a largely Judaic society. And so entities from the Pope, for instance, and all other religious leaders may not appeal as much to the sensibilities of the leaders in Israel as it would come from, say, a Judaic, let's say Jew. But that said, the fact that we're also having opinion leaders across the world expressing their opinion on this and calling for truth may be a major player in bringing back the voice of reason. Because whether we like it or not, and Israel also has to admit this, that, well, Hamas has caused enough troubles, but the way to go is not the current way. A situation where children and women, unarmed persons are being affected, by this war of a large scale is not something that the world wants to experience. We're still handling, the Ukraine-Russia crisis, and now having Israel and Palestine, which, if not well handled, can even snowball into a crisis.
All right, Mr. Amuda, we have a lot more to discuss on this, but finally, before I let you go, we've seen horrific videos of abandoned babies found decomposing in Gaza's hospital weeks after it was evacuated. What does this say about the effectiveness of, those in charge of evacuating these civilians?
Now, the problem with the effectiveness is, don't forget that at the moment Israel does not even, grant a right of passage to medical supplies. So we would keep having issues like this. A lot of them have been calls across the globe that Israel needs to respect war ethics. There are standard rules when it comes to war, and so you need to allow that right of passage. A situation where you don't have that right of passage for medical supplies to the other side, regardless of whatever the situation may be, is not the way to go. So we would not have that effectiveness on the part of evacuation because of the current situation. Now, there is bad blood already brewing, in fact, not just brewing, that has brewed between the two parties, and the hostility informs the way and, of course, the process and the speed of the process through which this evacuation takes place. So that is expected until this bad blood that has brewed now is settled or a bit ameliorated. We may not have anything better.
All right, I have been speaking with Global Affairs Analyst Amuda Mosigbodi. Joins me via Zoom. Thank you for joining us on The World Now.
You're most welcome.